In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. It is now officially October, it is the Halloween season, and I hope everyone is ready for what I have in store. I have a few surprises. I would like to thank everyone who entered into my 300 subscriber contest, which was really fun. Congratulations to Jason from Horrific Nightmares for winning, and a big thank you to Raven Wednesday, who entered after the deadline to submit. She entered anyway because she wanted to promote my channel, which I thought was really sweet. The main reason I set the deadline when I did was just so I would know where all the entries were and I could have them in place, so I didn't have a bunch of people entering last minute and I wasn't scrambling to get all of that in order. I was actually able to enter her into the contest and she did not win, but I was glad I was able to get her in because that was really nice. She will be linked below and she's just been really wonderful in supporting me. Today I am going to be reviewing the movie Coven. I think this is a really good one to start off the Halloween season with for reasons I will get into. This is a movie that came out in 1987. It is a made-for-TV movie and it stars a lot of people that are fairly well known. I don't know them as well because I live in a vacuum that mostly consists of horror movies, but I did some research just to make sure I knew what I was talking about, and this movie stars Tim Matheson as husband Jerry. He is probably best known for Animal House. This stars Pamela Sue Martin as Linda, who is known for being in the Poseidon Adventure and hosting Saturday Night Live for a period of time. This stars Barbara Billingsley, who was the mother in Leave It to Beaver. She plays Beatrice Gower in this, and this stars Woody Harrelson as awkward friend Slater. He's probably best known for Cheers, but he's been in a ton of other things as well. And there are other notable names in this too, from what I can tell. I just can't list every single person who's in this movie right now, or I won't even get into the review. This movie follows Jerry and Linda. They have decided to move to a little town on an island known as Devlin Island, to a little town called Bay Cove, because Jerry has gotten this really big job in the city, which he has found himself unsatisfied with. He feels cooped up and he wants to start doing something with his hands again and get away from the sort of claustrophobic city life. Pretty early on they realize, or at least Linda realizes, that things are not quite as they seem. Based on the title, we kind of already know that there are some witchy happenings going on. It is up to Linda to try and convince her husband of what's going on and to uncover just what all of the weirdness is in this little town of Bay Cove, and it is a lot trickier than she thinks it's going to be. Visually, this movie is very obviously made for TV, but it has a charm to it that I really like. The cinematography especially, there are lots of really interesting shots and camera angles. There is an overhead shot that travels between two different rooms through a wall. There are really interesting close-ups. There are shots of people's warped reflections in glasses. It's a really visually interesting movie, which I haven't seen as much from a lot of made-for-TV stuff, so I like that they were trying to be a little bit more artistic and interesting with the visuals in this. Some of the sets are very stylized in a way that I like. It's not heavily stylized. It's very obviously made in the late 80s from the looks of especially the clothes that the characters are wearing. The city has a feel to it that I would characterize as very of movies of that time period, which I find very charming. Bay Cove has a slightly different feel. It feels like it's of a slightly earlier period, and it's very quaint and cozy, at least upon first glance. But of course, as people start digging into things more and more, they find more weird stuff. Honestly, it doesn't take them that long though. Pretty early on, they discover the meeting place of a coven of witches, and it is the basement of one of these buildings, which has this huge pentagram in the middle of the floor with a bunch of symbols drawn on it and torches at each point, and it's a very dark and dingy room, and it's very beautiful in my eyes, actually. I love the look of the Coven's meeting place. Of course, they are meant to be devil worshippers in this movie, and their pentagram is not inverted like it should be if they are Satanists or devil worshippers. I got into this when I reviewed... I can't even remember, but I reviewed an occult horror film a while back that did the same thing, but again, it's fictional devil worship, witchcraft, Satanism. I wasn't expecting it to be accurate from this made-for-TV movie. The music is also very of its time. It's very synthy, which I appreciated, both when it's being very sort of suspenseful and horror-ish, but also when it's being very sentimental and romantic. There are a lot of very decidedly 80s synthy keyboard sounds that I really enjoyed. There's also actual orchestral parts and string parts, even a little bit of pipe organ. It's not gonna stick out in my head, but I liked the overall tone and sound of the score. And there's also a musical number from this band in a bar near the beginning of the movie that is also nice. It's the only musical piece in the film that isn't score. I thought it made for some good foreshadowing in terms of some of the interpersonal relationship stuff that happens in the film, just lyric-wise, but it's also just a solid song. The main couple of Jerry and Linda are both well acted and decently likable. I don't find them all that intriguing or interesting as people. They're both just working these fairly generic jobs in the city. I don't even remember what it is that they're doing. Jerry even says, the most interesting thing I did today at my job was put a filter in the coffee maker. They're just not that interesting as people in terms of like what their interests are or quirks in personality, but they're both just good, likable people, and they're very well acted. I was able to sympathize with both of them and to be invested in their story and care about what was happening. Once they've moved to Bay Cove, they meet their two neighbors who are instantly just really casually intrusive and creepy. I just love that sort of slightly obnoxious creepiness to them. They also have a black cat with them, which of course immediately sort of endeared them to me, even though they're kind of horrible. And they remind me a lot of the neighbors in Rosemary's Baby in terms of their intrusiveness and their ulterior motives that no one can really prove. I think Woody Harrelson's character Slater even makes a comparison to Rosemary's Baby at one point in the film, if not by name. He's just referencing it. But I really like the creepiness of the neighbors and most of the people in the town, especially this really creepy shop owner who they meet, who is just the most over the top. He just has this very strange, wide-eyed, crazed look to him all the time, and he's clearly making everyone around him very uncomfortable. I don't really know quite how to describe him. He's just this very intense character. He doesn't say much. He just kind of stares at you, and he's just very strange in his mannerisms, and I really liked him. There are also these two creepy little kids, a girl and a boy. The girl is, for the most part, legitimately creepy. She's also the more sympathetic of the two, but she kind of stays in this very sort of dead-eyed, rarely talking state. I thought that was cool. The boy is honestly really funny to me in a lot of scenes, just in terms of his delivery, because he doesn't sound sinister. He just sounds like a kid delivering these lines, which are ominous, but they don't sound ominous when he says them. And there's just a scene later on town at this anniversary party for one of the people in the town, where he just walks up to this anniversary cake and he grabs a slice of cake, then steals one of the like icing flowers off of the cake and puts it in his mouth and just walks away. And there's no need for that to be in the movie, but it's just this wonderful little moment of this like creepy, ominous foreshadowing kid doing this really mischievous thing, and it feels in some ways out of place, but I love it. The movie, in fact, starts out at the beginning of the film. I haven't quite figured out what this is supposed to mean, but it starts out with this old man going into this church to confess to something. He starts his confession and he's like, I'm so old, I want to die, just let me die in peace. The little confession area just explodes. The priest like crosses himself and he's like, what just happened? And then it cuts to the city and Jerry and Linda's story. In some ways it makes sense given what we learn later on and some of the stuff that happens, but I still don't quite know what it means in terms of the story, but it really got my attention. Right off the bat, you get a sense of something being off in Bay Cove. Before they even move in, when they're looking at the house and deciding whether or not to buy it, Linda finds this book on the windowsill with a huge pentagram in it. And one of the townspeople are like, oh, grandfather loved to read, and that was his favorite book. And it's just like, you're not being as secretive as you really should be about this. It's really obvious. They're then later reading maybe even that same book, just like on a picnic. They open it up and they're like reading about the history of witchcraft in the town. And in fact, the town was literally called Bay Coven a long time ago. That's not just the name of the movie. The town was literally called Bay Coven, which is a weird choice to me. It's just like, why would you name the town that and not expect to have like everyone there accused of witchcraft and burned? But they did it, and then they changed the name to Bay Cove. It's like what I said with Moon of the Wolf, where they're trying to be like, oh, what's actually going on here? And then at the end they're like, oh, it's werewolves. And it's just like, we know it's werewolves. The movie is called Moon of the Wolf. And it's a similar thing here where they're being mysterious about what's actually going on, but we're like, we know it's witches. The movie's called Bay Coven, but they really don't try to hide it all that much, and there's enough interesting stuff happening throughout the movie that it didn't really bother me. Moon of the Wolf hinges so much on that mystery aspect of it that it just fell flat for me. This was entertaining regardless. At first, I wasn't really into the whole conflict that was going on with Jerry and Linda, because it's this whole idea of big business and the city versus this simple country life, and the two of them trying to figure out what it is that both of them really want and trying to make each other happy. And it's this very mundane conflict in the middle of this weird supernatural story that I didn't think I would be invested in, but I found myself very invested in their relationship and all of their sort of just personal struggles, and I thought it worked really well in conjunction with the film, because as the weirdness of the town progresses, you just see their relationship falling apart more and more, and it could just be that one of them is going crazy, or it could be that they're being affected by supernatural stuff. You don't really quite know until the end. It is just a very engaging story, both in terms of just human drama and weird witchy stuff. It's not all that easy for Linda to uncover what's going on, because details of the universe keep changing. And I'm not saying that in terms of like the story being inconsistent or whatever. It's like a plot thing. She tries to prove that someone in the town isn't actually dead because they haven't been buried, and she goes to the cemetery to prove that there's no headstone there, and you see a new headstone with that person's name rising up from the grounds behind her. People's names will change, people that were there before won't be there. She's just trying to prove what's happening, and these witches have some kind of power that can bend this town and her universe in really weird ways, and I just thought it was cool because it also brought into question whether or not she was just going crazy at some points. Given that this is a horror movie, it has something of a body count, and the deaths in this movie are always really dramatic. At the beginning of the movie, there's this crazy explosion. That is something that somewhat carries into other parts of the film. There are just sudden, very dramatic deaths, including at least one other explosion. Some of the deaths feel sort of in place in this supernatural story, and some of them are just like random explosion here, and it's weird, but it's also kind of awesome. It reminded me a little bit of Phantasm in that regard, in that they're like, we've got to put an explosion in this movie. It doesn't have to make sense. It can feel way too dramatic for what we're trying to do right here, but explosion here. Except I think the explosions in this movie actually make more sense than the ones in the Phantasm movies, but that's another conversation. The ending of this movie, I'm not going to spoil for you, but it is full of crazy plot twists, and it is also very over the top and dramatic and very entertaining. I don't really want to spoil this movie for you. I don't know if I'd consider it an amazingly well-made movie. It's not the greatest story I've ever heard, but it has a lot of good acting in it. I think they're able to sell what they have really well, and it has something of a slightly cheesy charm to it. I think it would be a fun one to check out, especially in October, if you like supernatural horror films and occult horror films. Did it blow my mind? No. Is it a good portrayal of witchcraft? Absolutely not, but it is an entertaining film, and I do recommend watching it. The only other thing I have to warn you about is that if you don't like cute animals dying in your movie, that happens to an animal in this film. It's not graphic or on screen, it's just sad. That is my review of Coven. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye.